Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the session on purchase to pay trends for 2020 and beyond. Know your AI from your IA. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to the session during these quite remarkable times. So, a quick introduction from myself. Um, it is Nick Walden from the Hackett Group speaking. You can see my picture on left and a short bio as additional information. Hackett are a leading strategic advisory and consulting firm, and our typical client is a large, big brand multinational company. I lead our procurement and purchase to pay membership advisory program. Some of you may have already come across me or know me. I've presented regularly at previous PPN transformation events. A little about my background. I live here in the UK, in Surrey. I've been in the UK for the last 20 years. I'm originally from New Zealand, if you're wondering a little about my accent. So in terms of my background, I've worked in a number of industry roles for many years, first starting in strategic finance, moving over into strategic procurement, many years as a consultant working on a number of change projects, process reengineering and technology, and the last 12 years with Hackett. So in that role with Hackett, I work with a portfolio of clients in terms of helping them achieve their transformation goals, and I contribute to our new best practice research. So in this session, I'd like to share perspectives covering three topics. First up, to talk a little bit about purchase to pay's operational response to respond to this COVID-19 pandemic. Any presentation looking at 2020 trends really needs to include insights on our current experiences and to think a little how they may look to reshape the immediate future. Second up, I want to explore 2020 modern trends as our priorities shift beyond only efficiency towards delivering a strategic value proposition. So we'll cover that in a bit more detail, and then move on in terms of a third key topic, which is how our roadmap needs to change and illustrate with Hackett benchmarks our progress towards achieving those goals, but also the opportunities and challenges in terms of how we look to further transform our operations. So if we start with the first topic around purchase to pay's operational response to COVID-19, I think it's fair to say that this COVID-19 pandemic situation, as it says in the header there, has swiftly swept the globe and caused cataclysmic effects on the economy as we have locked down and shut down. Company financial positions and operations have been disrupted, and certainly continuity of our supply chains has been impacted. Different countries will be at different stages, but it's fair to say from at least a UK perspective, we are mostly through the immediate crisis response and looking forward to recovery and future return. Now, depending on your company, which industry sector you sit in and where in the world you're located, then you may be facing different outcomes. You can see that from the shapes of different curves here on the screen, just trying to illustrate some of the different potential forecasts or whatnot we may be facing. In the green line, if you're based in a healthcare sector or industry, you may be looking at a future revenue surge, looking to benefit from the situation. But for nearly everyone else, there'll be one of the blue, the yellow, or the red lines, right? Facing an uncertain future, perhaps a future that's more drawn out and protracted in terms of recovery, or actually an immediate rebound. So definitely some interesting times. So the good news to report is that most organizations reported only a minimal level of disruption to their operations, right? So At Hackett, during this period, we were very keen to support our clients with new crisis response research, but also to provide our perspectives and what other organizations were doing during this period as well. So we set up some sessions with our clients, some roundtable discussions, some online polling to bring together other large multinational teams, P2P teams, during early April. And you see some of the results here up on the screen in the next couple of slides. You can see that 2/3 of companies reported they were mostly okay so far, and then another 1/3 were reporting they were facing major disruption to their operations. What we heard is that the most confident teams, companies, were those that were most able to effectively utilize any existing emergency response plans and then to be able to adapt to remote working practices for all but most essential team members. Many others were also helped by the fact that transaction volumes were perhaps greatly reduced. So the volume of orders and invoices really dropped away for some companies during this period. We heard from companies that they were adopting temporary policies and procedures and communicating those both internally to their own organization and employees, but also externally to suppliers. This might mean they were relaxing certain policies while balancing control that was needed in terms of financial control and expenditure to look to protect the core operations and authorizations and so on. In some cases, they were looking to accelerate supplier onboarding to promote the use of alternative buying channels, one-time vendors or P cards, just to make it easier for essential staff to get done what they needed to do. Others were promoting electronic or digital interactions for purchase orders, invoices, payments, communications, and inquiries. Another key lesson was around the importance to maintain workflow delegations and authorization. So if people were out on vacation or sick leave, then processes would still be running smooth. We heard especially from US colleagues and US clients that electronic payments were being adopted even by suppliers who have greatly resisted this change for a number of years. So around the world, the use of checks was still in use by a number of organizations there in North America. And of course, in any crisis situation, additional care and attention must be made to protect against fraud, phishing, or deception. So, we heard from some organizations how they were locking down the bank vendor master in terms of changes being made. I also wanted to share some additional insights, right? So what is it that P2P teams were taking in order to smooth their operations during this March and April time, and also to ensure business continuity? And I really hope that organizations are able to take forward some of these practices, the good positive changes and practices into their future operations. I read an interesting quote the other day, and it said that this period has perhaps enabled a decade of change to happen in only a matter of weeks or months. So this question was asking teams around how they have responded for P2P, and multiple choice answers were possible here. So you can see from the data, 60% of teams were updating their communications and policies to move away from paper to really promote electronic and digital invoicing and contact methods. Another 10% were taking a much stronger approach, no longer accepting paper, but subject to local rules and regulations. Some countries like India and Spain, they're much tighter. Another 20% said, actually, we've relaxed our policy. We want to make it easier for operations to continue. We want to balance control. So we're going to increase approval limits. We're going to perhaps loosen the requirement for having a purchase order, relax the use of a no PO, no pay policy, or make it easier to use P cards and so on. There were almost another 10% of organizations going the other way, being mindful of expenditure. They were tightening up So they were decreasing approval limits, they were deactivating corporate cards and cancelling open POs for discretionary spend. And then a second part of that looks at, well, what practices were adopted in terms of payments. And I think there's a really interesting perspective here in terms of the level of cooperation, the spirit of cooperation that's been seen by many teams as they step up their efforts to pay on time and pay particular attention to specific supplier types. So we saw that clients were telling us that over 50% of teams were saying, it's now harder and taking more time and effort to pay on time to be able to achieve previous performance levels. So more effort was needed. A quarter of organizations were saying that actually changed the timing of the payment cycle, so from daily to weekly, or perhaps that adjusted the number of days ahead in terms of selecting invoices for payment in the payment proposal. 15% of organizations had said that extended terms, so different than the last 2008 banking crisis. Great to see that we weren't necessarily seeing a knee-jerk or a widespread shift to longer or extending terms. And then almost 10% said that they'd taken steps to look out for the most vulnerable suppliers, being the micro or the small suppliers, and making available liquidity or accelerating payments or the availability of early payment discounts and so on. So that's a quick run through of some of the trends that we saw in terms of P2P teams' operational response to COVID-19. So let's move on now to talk a bit more about the modern trend beyond efficiency and towards strategic value generation. I think this is a really interesting trend. So I've got here some different insights based on Hackett survey data that really points out this dramatic shift in priorities being assigned to teams, and priorities are tending much more towards a greater value and a more strategic focus. And one perspective could be that during this period of significant change, this shift may be even more pronounced, more rapidly accelerated in terms of these current conditions. So, every 2 years at Hackett we run a specific survey called Purchase to Pay Key Issues and Priority Study, and the data looks to show what large multinational teams are telling us in terms of what are their key issues and priorities. So starting on the left-hand side there from 2012, going through to 2018. In 2012, the data was telling us the top 3 priorities were really around establishing and standardizing buy pay channels, standardizing our process, and looking at the use of shared services. We move on to 2014. Priorities had also shifted. We were continuing to work on buy pay channels, but we were now adopting end-to-end process models and pushing compliance. By 2016, we start to see the first mention or focus on stakeholder satisfaction. Value starts to appear, and also supporting sourcing savings. Now, by 2018, the new priorities around increasing internal satisfaction, digital transformation appears, and again, we see more value from the process being set as a priority. So, what does value mean in terms of this idea of more value? Well, from a Hackett perspective, we've traditionally defined value, what we mean by value in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. But we've looked at this for 2020 and beyond, and we've modernized our definition. We've added in the experience tower. So now we look to define modern value in terms of 3 overall benefit buckets. Starting on the left there, we've got efficiency, speed, we've got effectiveness in the middle, and experience on the right-hand side there. So, when we're talking about efficiency, really just looking to minimize cost, optimize resource productivity, eliminate waste, accelerate cycle times. Think about key metrics here in terms of cost per FTE, cost per transaction, productivity, and cycle time metrics. From an effectiveness perspective, in terms of value, we want to maximize business value by making sure we're delivering P2P services that best support key business priorities. So thinking about measuring and reporting metrics, in terms of success with working capital, perhaps a risk in the supply base or vendor master or whatnot, quality and compliance in our process, even perhaps incremental revenue delivered. And last up, experience, right? Here we want to optimize the value of stakeholder relationships. These stakeholders might be employees, they might be customers, they might be the business, might be suppliers. So here, metrics might be stakeholder satisfaction, might be net promoter scores, it could be stakeholder experience, or just simply looking to improve the ease of use. Now, a further data point from the same Kyushu study that I was talking about earlier shows that in terms of these value buckets, and this is, I think, is a really interesting and really telling point. More than half of teams were telling us that their priorities were now set broader than only efficiency, right? So instead of the focus just on efficiency on the left-hand side, they were saying, you know what, our priorities are set broader, so it's efficiency plus effectiveness, or it's efficiency, effectiveness, as well as an experience, right? So, you'd see a composition of those metrics on their P2P scorecard, and they'd be regularly reporting those to the CFO or controllers or other stakeholders or whatnot, rather than just focusing on efficiency metrics. Okay, so let's move on to the third topic. So, I think adopting a modern roadmap to be able to transform our operations for strategic value is a key trend as well, right? I'm going to talk to this three-stage roadmap. I mean, another perspective in terms of what I've seen is that, another reason for this change, another driver for why we need to change, is that even many of the leading teams are struggling, right? They're hitting the boundaries in terms of what they can achieve in terms of efficiency, right? Their cost to process a transaction might be down to, £1, $1, €1, whatnot, and they're finding it increasingly difficult to go any lower. So they're forced to add initiatives on the experience side or effectiveness side to be able to unlock the potential to drive further efficiency as well as other advantages as well, right? Broaden out that value proposition in terms of what the teams are delivering. So let me talk you through that, right? This three-stage modern roadmap to transform operations for value beyond efficiency. So it's a fairly simple three-stage plan. Starting at the bottom there, stage one, developing the foundation. Here key steps include automating a standard process, streamlining the policy that we've put in place, drive efforts around improving quality and compliance within the process, and then once we've built that foundation, we can then move on to stage two around optimization. So here we're looking to optimize the process, look to drive further efficiencies, practices like defining and promoting the use of preferred channels, providing support to the different stakeholders as needed. And within this stage, there might be different optimization iterations, right? So we might go through this iteration stage a number of times, dropping down perhaps to the foundation again as we identify further improvement opportunities, revisit that foundation, and then come up to the optimization stage and drive more value as additional opportunities are uncovered. But once we've pushed stage one and stage two as far as we can, the next step is really around stage three, looking to drive strategic value. And here the focus is around how we enhance the experience and how we further capture effectiveness benefits. And I'll say, there's a few teams, perhaps the top 10% of high-performing teams that are really pushing hard at this level. But let's look at this roadmap in a bit more detail. So, starting first with stage one, the foundation. I've got 3 Hackett metrics here that look to show median performance, median data points. And it's interesting when you look at the metrics here and the success that there's quite a few opportunities or challenges that remain here, right? So the first metric around digitalize and automating purchase orders? Where are we using electronic purchase orders with suppliers and disseminating those POs electronically to suppliers? 30% adoption here. The second key metric around digitalization and automating of invoices, 30% in terms of median performance, so using electronic invoices, so advanced electronic invoices or invoice list type transactions. And then in terms of success driving policy and compliance and quality, median organization has been able to influence spend that invoice-only spend is down to 27%. So we can characterize the stage by saying that many teams seem to be operating a twin-track process, right? This combination of a legacy process as well as modern digital processes. And looking at the progress that we've made and some of the struggles that teams seem to be facing, I'd say as one perspective, it seems like we need to be taking a much more joined-up approach to transformation here. So to move away from just tactical efforts to say, hey, we need to work on scanning or OCR, or we need to launch an electronic invoicing initiative, but really to think a bit broader, a bit bolder, and say our goal could be something like we want to capture 100% of spend and make sure that all of our transactions are digital, and we're going to do that through a multi-pronged set of initiatives, and we're going to aim to maximize the digital elements, but we realize there's going to be certain constraints based on where in the world that we operate and transact with. So again, doing similar, but this time for level 2, the optimization phase. How are teams progressing? In the middle of the screen there, again, I've picked 3 typical Hackett metrics, and these represent median performance again. And if we think about what's our goal, what are the steps that we're trying to do here? We're thinking about optimizing efficiency and doing some effectiveness initiatives, perhaps centralizing invoice receipt, perhaps defining channels for buying, for invoicing, for payments. We want to adopt and promote the use of preferred channels, or automated validation and business rules for rejection, perhaps two-way invoice matching, the use of a standard payments terms or process or whatnot. So here, looking at some metrics, guiding to the preferred channel. So we can see 69% are saying they are effective or mostly effective at guiding requisitioners to pre-negotiated sources of supply. In terms of a quality perspective, we look at the first pass match rates for PO invoices. Then 81% is being achieved in terms of match rates, which is great from a quality perspective. And then looking at, say, a metric around enhancing supplier relationships, we can see that from a median perspective, again, 82% of transactions are paid on time to terms. So, some great progress there at the median level. And interestingly, again, just making that point, we seem to have made a lot more progress on the optimization level, perhaps, than that foundation level. And I guess the point I'm trying to make there is that, teams are seem to be facing some common and consistent challenges, right? And I recently presented another event, and I did a quick survey with the P2P folks in the room, and about 75% of people responded by saying, yes, they recognize each one of these challenges and they are struggling to address today, right? So in terms of how we resolve, we might want to think about adopting some fresh approaches here. Typically, before the pandemic was facing us, then, we were struggling around how we're able to achieve, high consistent levels of digital enablement across all markets, electronic PO, electronic payments, electronic invoices, and so on. We were facing certain challenges in terms of the visibility into our transactions. What are the transactions flowing through our system? Where are they getting stuck? What are the root causes for why there's a delay or a blockage? How can we get the information that we need to perhaps optimize the last 5 to 10% of our process if we're a top performer? Many organizations said they were facing a heavy onboarding process or some real challenges, quality issues in master data. Bank account verification was quite popularly called out as well. We had challenges around cycle time. So how can we get the timely approval or receipting or responding to inquiries to stakeholders or suppliers or whatnot. We wanted to address and deal with challenges in our process in terms of errors, duplicates, and also potential fraud. And we were also facing some challenges around satisfaction. Now, in terms of future trends and how they might impact purchase to pay and accounts payable and how they might help us solve and resolve some of these challenges that I've just talked through, there's a number of new trends. I'm going to talk a bit about technology, service design, talent trends, and also the perspective on value that can provide some further value here. So if I start first with technology, we do start to see new features and functionality, artificial intelligence, smart automation, the machine learning, the RPA, the advanced analytics, mobility solutions. These new features and functionality, offer the real potential to drive towards higher levels of automation. We might be able to get close to this 98% automation of our transactions using an ecosystem of different technology solutions, right? So that combination of core automation and other additional best-of-breed solutions to provide the capabilities that we need. They're going to help us get to this goal of 100% spend and invoice capture and provide real-time visibility into our processes. From a service design perspective, we're really looking here to shift from just this focus around our end-to-end process towers, but to go broader, to think about how we engineer and design true end-to-end services that stretch fully from the buyer to the supplier. So Mondelez would be one example here, and they've reshaped their global process owner roles. So for P2P, instead of a P2P process owner, they've now got like an invoice payment experience leader. So that reflects, the service as well as taking on board these new objectives. Moving on from just a one-size-fits-all approach, but to pick up ideas around customer centricity and to customize and enable certain preferred channels and stakeholders by their persona group, right? So customizing it and personalizing it there. Now, also see a new trend around operations control towers and the real-time analytics. So companies like Deutsche Telekom and Vodafone are using these tools to provide insights and to achieve performance levels like never before. And then from a talent perspective, we really start to see some new roles and changed responsibilities appear. So rather than just focusing around executing transactions, there's a much greater focus around actually root cause elimination and exception management, right? And then, of course, we need new roles to support digital enablement and the deployment and implementation of these new digital capabilities. And then from a value perspective, right, more value is being demanded, right? This presentation to you has been talking through that shift in priorities and the roadmap to deliver that. But we need to be thinking about how we can accelerate execution in a more agile way and achieve other goals like paying to terms. Delivering additional areas of value, perhaps supporting master data stewardship, or governance, control. This idea that master data should be and can be a strategic asset. Other areas like using the data to protect against supply risk or protect the brand, certainly to improve and drive compliance and the experience. So getting close to the end here. So just finishing up, the third level layer in this three-stage roadmap, looks at how we can drive much more towards strategic value. So again, If we think about our objective, our goal here, we want to enhance the experience and make sure that we can capture much more of the full effectiveness and experience benefits. So again, picking 3 typical Hackett metrics, and these represent median performance. So starting first on the left-hand side there around enhancing the stakeholder experience, and you can see the number 28% of stakeholders satisfied or very satisfied within the purchase to pay process. No stakeholders actually reporting very satisfied. So this is quite a big gap and a big opportunity here. The leaders do score, twice as high here, twice as well. So, don't think of these low scores as an excuse not to focus on or work on this point, because, as I mentioned earlier, I think, you can get it so far, and then you rely on a great experience to be able to achieve some of the further efficiency gains. In the middle column there at the top, benefiting from the financial supply chain. So thinking about the use of liquidity or early payment discounts or whatnot to certain supplier types. So increasingly popular in certain market conditions, current market conditions even, for those who have these capabilities in place, almost 2/3 say they have a strategy to guide which suppliers are targeted when to create value here. And then on the top right-hand side, the opportunity to use and explore emerging technologies like AI, machine learning, robotics, and so on. You see the number here, 24% of finance organizations are piloting or using RPA today within the finance function. Right. So again, this is another area to think about, having a digital strategy to make sure that you deliver on your expectations. So, that's a quick run through in terms of the operations impact from a COVID-19 perspective, to talk about the greatest shift and focus away from just efficiency to strategic value from the P2P team, and also, the modern roadmap in terms of 3 stages to deliver that. So I hope that's been useful, and if you've got any questions for me, then we can shift to that. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for your time. Thanks for listening. Thank you. Bye-bye.